A flawless shot rang out across the elite shooters club, echoing like thunder, followed by roaring applause from an audience clad in designer shooting attire. Blake Radcliffe slowly lowered his custom Remington rifle, a smug grin spreading across his bronzed face as yet another bullseye appeared on the screen. This was his realm, a sanctuary where wealth, influence, and raw skill separated the elite from everyone else. If you've ever felt overlooked or dismissed, you'll want to hear what happened next. The moment that upended everything at the most prestigious shooting range in the country. Emma Miller stood quietly near the club's entrance, clutching her weathered leather purse. Her modest blue cardigan and off-the-rack jeans made her look entirely out of place, like a lone wildflower in a garden of roses. At 35, she was neither youthful enough to attract attention nor powerful enough to demand respect in a space ruled by privilege. Behind the reception desk, a perfectly polished blonde in a tailored blazer looked up with a robotic smile, only to dismiss Emma moments later, as if she were a smudge on an otherwise pristine mirror. "Excuse me," Emma said softly, "I'd like to sign up for today's open session." The receptionist's eyes gave her a quick scan from her sensible flats to her plain ponytail before replying flatly, "Members only." Emma drew a steady breath and pulled out a creased envelope. "I have a day pass." It was a gift. Across the room, Blake caught sight of the newcomer. At 42, he was the golden boy of the sport, a 5-time national title holder, an Olympic champion, and the face of Remington's elite line. With oil money in his blood and top-tier training from the cradle, Blake was the embodiment of precision and privilege. "Well, he called out loudly, his voice laced with arrogance. "Someone make a wrong turn on their way to Walmart?" Laughter erupted on cue from his group, drawing unwanted attention to Emma as she quietly made her way to the basic practice lane, eyes on the floor. Rebecca Johnson, the club's manager and a seasoned shooter in her own right, frowned at Blake's jab but held her tongue. Emma took her place at the far end of the beginner's lane. She gently placed her purse on the shelf and carefully unwrapped a cloth bundle, revealing a standard Glock 19E, reliable but plain, a stark contrast to the club members' customized weaponry. Blake and his entourage drifted closer, drawn by the scent of mockery and easy entertainment. $10 says she can't even hit the paper," someone sneered. Blake smirked. "Make it 10 grand. I bet she's never fired a weapon in her life." He sauntered over to her lane. "Pardon me, ma'am," he said, oozing false charm. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This isn't your local sewing circle." Emma met his gaze, her hazel eyes calm and steady, catching him slightly off guard. "I'm just here to practice," she said evenly. Blake recovered quickly. "Practice, sweetheart? This range is for real shooters. Tell you what, a $10,000 says you can't hit the bullseye from 50 yards. Her face didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I don't have that kind of money." His grin widened. "Then let's make it interesting. If by some miracle you make the shot, I pay. If not, you leave, for good." Rebecca had come closer, concern etched into her features. "Mr. Radcliffe, maybe we should let our guest practice without interference." Blake waved her off. "Relax, Rebecca. It's just a friendly wager." Emma's eyes dropped briefly to her left hand, where a simple gold wedding band gleamed. She twisted it once, a small gesture that only the keenest observer might notice. "All right," she said softly. Blake raised his brows, then smirked victoriously. "Ladies and gentlemen, looks like we've got ourselves a show." No one noticed the shift in Emma's posture. She picked up her Glock with smooth, deliberate movements. Her spine straightened, shoulders fell into alignment, feet angled into a perfectly balanced stance. Her grip was flawless, her breathing calm and measured. The crowd didn't see it, but she moved like someone who'd done this many times. They also didn't know that the gold ring on her finger once belonged to one of the most legendary snipers in SEAL Team 6 history. 3 years earlier, Emma had stood beneath a cold April sky, the sound of a rifle salute slicing through the silence at Arlington National Cemetery. She clutched a folded American flag to her chest, its weight heavier than anything she'd ever carried, as her husband's casket descended into the ground. Master Chief Nathan Miller had served the country for 15 years in his unmatched precision, earning him numerous accolades and the quiet nickname the Ghost among his peers. The official report claimed a helicopter crash during a classified mission. Emma knew better, There were parts of his death that would forever remain locked behind redacted files. They had met in Burlington, Vermont. Nathan was visiting a wounded teammate, and Emma was an accountant, her life as predictable as her spreadsheets. A chance encounter at a local coffee shop turned into hours of conversation. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony attended by close friends and Nathan's fellow SEALs, their alert eyes scanning the room even as vows were exchanged. Life as a SEAL's wife meant living with uncertainty, long disappearances, unexplained scars, and nightmares that crept into the quiet. "I wish I could tell you everything," he'd whisper, tracing her face with a calloused thumb. "But I can tell you this: you're the reason I fight to come home." During one rare extended stay stateside, Nathan, recovering from an injury, took Emma to a local shooting range. "If I'm going to be away so much," he told her, adjusting her stance, "I need to know you can protect yourself." What started as a precaution became a shared passion, a bridge into Nathan's world. He was a patient teacher, and Emma turned out to be a natural. "You've got it," he murmured the first time she landed a bullseye. The three things that make a great shooter: steady hands, sharp eyes, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. That's what Nathan always said made a true marksman. Over the next 3 years, whenever Nathan was home, he and Emma trained together. He taught her everything: a proper stance, breath control, sight alignment, trigger discipline. "Shooting isn't about rage," he'd often remind her. "It's about mastering your body, your breathing, your fear." Emma absorbed each lesson with quiet focus. She found an unexpected sense of calm in the structure and control of the practice. The range became their sacred space, a silent language that strengthened their bond. Sometimes his fellow SEALs would join them. Michael Reeves, one of Nathan's closest friends, once leaned in and said, "Boss never shuts up about you. Says you're a better shot than half the guys he's trained." The last time Emma and Nathan shot together was 2 days before he deployed on what would be his final mission. That day, Nathan seemed different, quiet, introspective, watching Emma more than his own targets. "Promise me something," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "Promise me you'll keep practicing, even when I'm not around." She nodded, not understanding the full weight of that request. After the funeral, Emma couldn't bring herself to go back to the range. Nathan's weapons stayed locked in the safe, untouched. She moved to Boston for a clean slate, taking a job at a corporate accounting firm where no one knew her as a SEAL's widow. Then, last week, a package arrived from Michael Reeves. Inside was a day pass to the Elite Shooters Club, and a handwritten note. "Nathan would want you to keep your promise. 3 years is long enough to grieve in silence. Come back to the living. A. Michael." Now, standing in the Elite Shooters Club, Blake Radcliffe's challenge still hanging in the air, something deep inside Emma stirred. A flicker of the woman she'd once been, a strong, sure, and unshakable A began to rise again. As she lifted the Glock, her training returned like muscle memory. The world narrowed to just 3 things: herself, the firearm, and the distant target. She inhaled, held her breath just long enough, then slowly exhaled halfway and squeezed the trigger. The gunshot cracked through the quiet range. A mechanical hum filled the room as the target began to slide back. Blake wore his usual smirk, but a hint of unease crept into his expression when he noticed her flawless posture, a perfect stance, perfect form. Each slow click of the retrieval system raised the tension. When the target finally arrived, a single, perfect hole marked the exact center of the bullseye. Silence swallowed the room. Blake and his group stared in disbelief, unable to process what they were seeing. Emma calmly set the Glock down, her expression composed. Blake snatched the target and held it up, scrutinizing the shot. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, his voice tight with irritation. "Anyone can get lucky once." Rebecca stepped forward, her polished demeanor slipping just enough to reveal real respect. "That was an incredible shot. Miss a broken bar?" "Emma Miller," she replied quietly. Rebecca nodded with a smile, half apology, half admiration. "Miss Miller, perhaps you'd be interested in trying out our advanced range. It's clear you're no beginner." Before Emma could respond, Blake cut in. "Hold on, one fluke shot doesn't prove anything. Let's see if she can do it again, with real stakes this time." A nervous stir moved through the growing crowd. $50,000, Blake declared, pulling a checkbook from his blazer pocket. Hit 3 bullseyes in a row from 75 yards. Miss even once, and you admit you cheated and leave. Senator Williams, standing nearby, placed a cautious hand on Blake's shoulder. Blake, maybe this isn't the moment for theatrics. Blake brushed him off. What's wrong? Afraid your trick won't work 3 times in a row? Emma thought about walking away. She had come only to honor her promise to Nathan, not to put on a show. But Blake's arrogance wasn't just offensive, it awakened something fierce inside her, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or excluded. I accept, she said quietly, on one condition: if I win, the $50,000 goes to the Veterans Support Foundation. Blake hesitated, then shrugged. Fine, not like you'll win anyway. As Emma stepped toward the 75-yard line, Rebecca approached. Miss Miller, I should tell you Mr. Radcliffe holds the club record at this distance. No one's bested it in 5 years. Emma nodded, grateful for the heads up. Thank you for the warning, Miss Johnson. But I'll manage. Rebecca studied her, noting the calm self-assurance that didn't match Emma's modest appearance. Blake was already hyping the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, prepare to witness either the most impressive accident in shooting history or a complete meltdown. 3 bullseyes at 75 yards. With a standard handgun, impossible for an amateur. Emma loaded fresh magazines with methodical precision. Her mind replayed Nathan's voice. When the pressure's on, he'd told her, fall back on training. Trust your body. Rely on your training. Nathan had once told her, let your body take over when your mind is overwhelmed. The range had gone completely still. Every eye was fixed on the unfolding showdown. For the first shot, Emma took a little more time, carefully compensating for the added distance. The gun fired, and the round landed with flawless precision. Blake's jaw clenched. The second shot came faster. Emma subtly shifted her stance, exhaled, and squeezed. Another bullseye. Before her third attempt, she gave her wedding band a gentle twist, grounding herself in Nathan's memory, his presence as vivid as if he were beside her. The final shot rang out and struck dead center. Blake's face paled, frozen between disbelief and rage. Rebecca returned moments later with the targets in hand, holding them up for all to see. There was no doubt 3 perfect hits from an amateur's position, using a standard handgun, at a distance that challenged even seasoned experts. Congratulations, Miss Miller, Rebecca said, unable to hide the awe in her tone. That was extraordinary. Blake grabbed the targets from her hands, inspecting them like a man desperate for an explanation. There's a broken bar. This is impossible, he muttered. No one just walks in here and does this. She must have rigged it. Emma stood quietly, but her tone cut through the room like a blade. We had a deal, Mr. Radcliffe. A deal with a cheat? Blake shouted. I'm not handing over $50,000 for some parlor trick. Rebecca stepped in again. Mr. Radcliffe, dozens of members witnessed the shots, Senator Williams included. They were clean, legitimate. Blake turned on her, his finger jabbing the air dangerously close. Stay in your lane, Rebecca. One call to the board and you're done here. The threat silenced Rebecca, but the flicker in her eyes hardened. Emma watched it all, her expression unreadable. If you believe I cheated, she said coolly, perhaps we should discuss it in private. Blake misread her tone completely. Private? So you can escape the consequences? No way, we settle this here and now. He turned to the growing crowd. 1 week from today, he declared, a real competition, head-to-head. 10 stations, multiple distances, no custom weapons at all club-provided equipment. Emma realized then that this had spiraled into something bigger than her original intent. Part of her wanted to walk away, but deeper inside, something refused to let her. She couldn't turn her back now, not with so many watching, not after being challenged so publicly. I accept, she said softly. Same terms. If I win, the $50,000 goes to the Veterans Support Foundation. Blake's smile was thin and forced. Fine, and when I win, you explain exactly what trick you pulled today. As the crowd started to disperse, Rebecca returned to Emma's side. That was either incredibly brave, a broken bar, or incredibly reckless, she said. Blake doesn't take humiliation lightly, and he holds a lot of power here. Emma, now drained as the adrenaline wore off, nodded. "I didn't come here looking for conflict. I just wanted to practice." Rebecca studied her carefully. "Yet you shoot like someone with years of training. Who are you, really?" Emma slung her purse over her shoulder. "Just someone keeping a promise," she whispered. What Emma didn't know, what no one knew, was that Blake had already pulled out his phone. As he stepped into a quiet corner of the club, his voice turned low and serious. "Find out everything you can about Emma Miller," he ordered his assistant. "I don't care how, just do it." His voice trembled, not from anger alone, but from something deeper, fear, because Blake recognized something in Emma's technique, something the others had missed: a military precision, the kind that couldn't be imitated. News of the confrontation spread fast across Boston's elite circles. By nightfall, Blake's phone was flooded with texts and voicemails from friends, rivals, and reporters, all buzzing about the mysterious woman who had just upstaged him at his own game. Sitting high above the city in his penthouse, he stared out over the Charles River, a crystal glass of aged scotch swirling in his hand. What should have been a celebration now served as a way to steady his nerves. Across from him, Jessica Thompson, his girlfriend, scrolled through her phone, watching the online frenzy unfold. "They're calling her the unknown marksman," Jessica said, her voice tense. "Someone uploaded a shaky video of her last shot. It's already gone viral." Blake drained the rest of his drink in a single gulp. "A lucky day doesn't make her a shooter. By next week, they'll all know she's a fraud." Jessica looked up, her expression more serious than usual. "Blakey, a broken bar. Those weren't lucky shots. I've watched you compete for years." "She's good, really good." The sharp ring of his phone interrupted them. Blake straightened as he saw the caller ID as private investigator. "Tell me you found something," he said without greeting. The voice on the line was hesitant. "Not much yet, Mr. Radcliffe." Emma Miller, 35, senior accountant at a Boston firm, senior accountant at Meridian Financial, moved to Boston from Virginia Beach 3 years ago. Clean background, pays taxes, keeps to herself, no online presence, no record of competitive shooting. The report was concise, but it only deepened Blake's frustration. "That's not possible," he growled. "Nobody shoots like that without training." "Keep digging." He ended the call and started pacing his penthouse, his movements sharp and restless. "I don't get it," he muttered. "Who is she? Where the hell did she learn to shoot like that?" Jessica, seated nearby, watched him with growing concern. "Blake, maybe you should let this go. Pay the charity. Call it a bad day." Blake stopped cold. His glare made her flinch. "This isn't about money," he snapped. "This is about my reputation, my name, my legacy." Across the city, Emma sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her phone. Michael Reeves had called several times since she left the range. The world of shooters, especially among those with military ties, was smaller than most people realized. She made herself a cup of tea and stepped onto her balcony, trying to process everything. Part of her regretted accepting Blake's public challenge at the attention wasn't something she'd asked for. Yet another part of her felt strangely alive again, as if something buried deep within her had finally surfaced. Her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She hesitated, then picked up. "Miss Miller, this is Rebecca Johnson from the Elite Shooters Club." Emma's spine straightened slightly. "Rebecca, broken bar, what can I do for you?" Rebecca's tone carried quiet urgency. "I probably shouldn't be calling, but I thought you deserved a heads up. Blake's having people dig into your background. He's convinced you cheated." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, not shocked, but still disappointed. "Thank you for letting me know," she said calmly, "but I have nothing to hide." Rebecca lowered her voice. "Look, I don't know who you are or where you learned to shoot like that, but Blake Radcliffe, he's not just wealthy. His family has deep roots in Boston. If he sees you as a threat, he can make life very unpleasant." Emma appreciated the concern, but her years as a military spouse had taught her the difference between a threat and a scare tactic. "I'll be careful," she said, "but I intend to see this through. I made a promise." After hanging up, Emma pulled out a small wooden box from her closet, Nathan's memory chest. Inside were his medals, old letters, and their wedding photo. Beneath the folded flag from his funeral lay a well-worn logbook, Nathan's training journal. She flipped through the pages, finding the ones that documented their sessions together. His neat handwriting still made her pause. Emma, a 50 yards, a 9 out of 10 bullseyes, natural talent, better than most recruits. The next morning, for the first time in 3 years, Emma called out sick from work. Instead of heading to the office, she drove to a public shooting range far away from the polished elitism of Blake's club. For 8 straight hours, she trained focused, consistent, meticulous. Every shot was more than a test of accuracy, and was a silent conversation with Nathan's memory. A promise kept, a connection that death hadn't severed. That evening, Rebecca texted her again. Blake requested rule changes for the match. Now wants 10 different firearms at varying distances. The board approved. Emma immediately understood what that meant. Blake was trying to turn the event into a showcase of his vast training, hoping she'd slip up somewhere along the way. Her reply was brief: "Thank you for the update. No changes needed on my end." Across town, Blake read the message with satisfaction. "Perfect," he said to Jessica. 10 firearms, 10 stations. She can't possibly keep up with that kind of diversity. Jessica set her wine glass down slowly. "And if she does?" Blake's smirk was empty. "She won't, but just in case she gets closing a broken bar, I've arranged for a little insurance." The day before the competition, Emma finally opened her door to find Michael Reeves standing outside. "You couldn't answer a call?" he asked, voice rough with concern. Emma stepped aside, smiling faintly. "I've been busy." Michael looked around her small apartment, noticing the training manuals and firearm guides covering the table. "Yeah, I figured." "Word's out. Everyone's talking about you and Radcliffe." They sat across from each other at the table. "You know, Nathan would be proud," Michael said. "Not just of the shooting, but of you stepping out into the world again." Emma's throat tightened. Tears welled up unexpectedly. "I'm not sure that's what I'm doing," she murmured. "This wasn't supposed to happen." Michael nodded, understanding. "The best battles usually aren't planned, but sometimes a broken bar, they're exactly what we need." He reached across the table, placing his weathered hand over hers for a moment. "You're not alone in this. I've called in a few favors. There'll be people in the crowd tomorrow, people who've got your back." As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. "One more thing, be careful with Radcliffe. A guy like that, with his money and ego, he's not used to losing, and he definitely won't take it well if he does." Emma gave a small nod, her voice steady. "I will." "And Michael, thank you. Thanks for the access and for everything else." The man's smile was genuine. "Just keeping a promise to a brother, that's what we do." Blake Radcliffe's curiosity about Emma Miller had started as a bruised ego. By midweek, it had turned into a full-blown obsession, one that consumed more of his energy than any actual training. The initial report had been maddeningly clean: no criminal history, no traffic violations, and not even a hint of involvement in professional shooting circles. On paper, Emma Miller appeared to be a completely average accountant living a simple life. "Focus on Virginia Beach," Blake instructed his investigator during a tense phone call. "She lived there before Boston. Look into shooting clubs, instructors, anyone who might remember her, and that wedding ring she always touches. Find out about her husband." The investigator responded with a calm, professional tone despite the pressure. "Understood, Mr. Radcliffe. I'll check marriage records in Virginia." "I don't care how you do it," Blake cut in sharply. "The match is in 2 days. I want answers." After hanging up, Blake stood in front of the massive framed photo on his wall, his Olympic gold medal from 8 years ago. In the picture, the younger version of himself wore a wide, unguarded smile, a joy that had faded with each year of fame and growing pressure. That night, while reviewing slow-motion footage of Emma's shooting technique, his phone lit up with a call. His investigator was on the line. "Virginia Beach was the missing piece, Mr. Radcliffe." "Emma Miller is the widow of Master Chief Nathan Miller, U.S. Navy SEAL, killed in action 3 years ago. He was a highly decorated sniper." Blake went still. "A SEAL? You're sure?" "Absolutely," the investigator replied. "Miller was known for training his wife. Some of his team referred to it as a hobby, but from what I've gathered, he took it seriously. One source said she was a natural, better than most new recruits." Blake's voice was tight. "Anything else?" "One detail," the investigator added. "Among his unit, Miller had a nickname, the Ghost. Said he could hit targets no one else could even see. He held several unofficial long-distance records in the special ops world. Blake ended the call and sat in silence, the weight of the revelation settling heavily on him. Emma Miller wasn't some lucky civilian. She wasn't an imposter. She was trained by a legend. And now, the story Blake had been telling himself that he was exposing in Emitters Flukia was falling apart. Worse, the real story taking shape was far more compelling. A war hero's widow honoring his legacy in a field dominated by privilege, challenging the man who had underestimated her. Meanwhile, Emma remained unaware of Blake's discovery. Her attention was solely on preparation. That Thursday evening, her phone rang. Rebecca Johnson again. "Miss Miller, I wanted to update you on another change to Saturday's match." Emma waited. The board approved a modification to the scoring system. Each station will now have weighted points based on difficulty. The final station will be worth 30% of the total score. Emma didn't even flinch. "Let me guess, the final station features a weapon Blake specializes in?" Rebecca hesitated. "It's a custom Macmillan TAC 338, a precision rifle Blake's known for. He's one of only a handful of civilians in this region with access to that specific model." Emma exhaled slowly, processing the change. She had strong handgun fundamentals from years of training with Nathana, but her long-range rifle experience was limited. She thanked Rebecca and ended the call, then sat in silence at her kitchen table. If Blake was digging into her life, it was only a matter of time before he unearthed Nathan's identity and everything that came with it. The next morning, she drove out to a secluded, advanced shooting facility she had arranged to access. As she pulled into the gravel lot, a black SUV caught her eye. Government plates. Leaning against it was a tall man with the unmistakable stance of someone from Special Operations. "Mrs. Miller, Commander Wilson, former Team 3. I served with Nathan back in Baghdad." Emma studied him. "I don't recall Nathan mentioning you." He nodded. "We weren't in the same unit, but everyone knew the ghost." He gestured toward the range. "Heard you might want some guidance on the Macmillan TAC 338. I've worked with that rifle quite a bit." For the next 4 hours, Commander Wilson led her through the nuances of the precision rifle. "Nathan trained you well with pistols," he remarked as she made a series of tight groupings. "You've got his control, his patience. This isn't much different, just a longer conversation between you and the target. Trust what you already know." By early afternoon, Emma was hitting her rhythm. She was now consistently hitting targets at distances that had seemed unimaginable just a few days before. As they packed up, Wilson handed her a small, weathered notebook. Nathan's notes, his formulas for wind adjustment and distance calculations, developed them himself. "You might find them useful tomorrow." Emma accepted it with quiet respect. "Thank you, Commander, but why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Wilson's hardened features softened. "When someone loses a brother in the teams, they look after what mattered to him. Nathan spoke about you often, said he was proud of how far you'd come, called your hands the steadiest he'd ever seen on a civilian." As Wilson walked away, Emma realized this wasn't just a competition anymore. It had transformed into a symbolic showdown between two very different worlds. Blake represented entitlement and visibility. Nathan had stood for quiet excellence, for those who served without needing recognition. Wealth and flash versus grit and legacy. That same evening, in his luxury penthouse, Blake received the last piece of information he'd been waiting on. Confirmation that Emma Miller was indeed the widow of Master Chief Nathan Miller, the decorated Navy SEAL sniper known in elite circles as the Ghost. His detailed service record, the respect he held among the Special Forces, and even the circumstances of his classified final mission were now part of Blake's files. Confidence wavering, Blake refilled his glass, ignoring Jessica's worried glance. "It changes nothing," he muttered. "Experience always beats sentiment." Jessica watched him carefully. "Blake, maybe it's time to step back, make a donation, withdraw from the event. This is becoming something else." He slammed the glass onto the table. "Withdraw? That would only confirm the rumors that I'm afraid of her." He reached for his phone and dialed a familiar number. "It's Blake. Is everything in place for tomorrow?" The call was short. When he hung up, Jessica was still watching him with a quiet intensity. "What was that about?" she asked, voice low. Blake gave a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just making sure everything's fair and square. my dear." The day of the match, the Elite Shooters Club was buzzing with unprecedented energy. What was originally a private contest had been opened to the public and transformed into a media event. Inside, Rebecca Johnson oversaw the final setup, noting with concern a number of subtle changes to the gear at various stations, changes that could only benefit someone with intimate familiarity with those particular weapons. Emma arrived in plain jeans and a navy shirt, her only gear duffel bag containing Nathan's notebook. Rebecca met her quietly. "I did an equipment inspection. Nothing I can officially report, but there are inconsistencies, just enough to make things tougher unless you're expecting them." Emma gave a small nod. "Thank you for telling me." Blake arrived not long after, surrounded by sponsors and well-wishers, dressed head to toe in gear plastered with brand logos. Approaching Emma, his expression was smug but tight. "Miss Miller," he said smoothly, "I trust you got a good night's sleep." The deliberate emphasis on her last name made it clear he knew. "You should know," he continued, "not everyone's cut out for high-pressure competition. There's no shame in stepping aside." Emma looked him in the eye. "I'll be fine, Mr. Radcliffe. My husband made sure I knew how to perform under pressure." The competition area had been arranged like a stadium, complete with digital scoreboards and 3 certified range officers. As Emma took position at the first station, she noticed a group of men in the back with unmistakable military posture, Michael Reeves among them. His small nod from the crowd gave her a jolt of strength. In the early rounds, Blake's polished skills were evident, his form precise, honed by years of elite matches. Emma's technique, however, was quieter and more methodical. There was a calm between each of her shots, the kind of calm that came from relentless training. By the 4th stage, Blake was ahead barely. His advantage was experience in this kind of environment. At the 5th station, Emma picked up on something. The trigger on the Sig Sauer felt slightly heavier than it should have. She remembered Nathan's advice: gear fails, conditions shift, adapt and overcome. She adjusted, recalibrated, and matched Blake's scenario despite the handicap. As the rounds continued, a pattern emerged. Blake thrived with competition-specific firearms, but Emma proved to be a master of consistency, especially with military-grade weapons. By the 8th station, their scores were nearly identical. The crowd was now visibly invested in Emma's quiet intensity, drawn to her determination in contrast to Blake's spectacle. Before the 9th round, Blake approached her once again. "You've done well, Mrs. Miller," he said with an almost mocking smile. "Your husband would be proud." "I've done my homework. His techniques are unique." Emma paused as he deliberately invoked Nathan's old nickname, the Ghost. She kept her face neutral. "Then you also know he valued integrity above everything else, Mr. Radcliffe." Maybe something to remember as we wrap this up. They moved to the final round, the most challenging Onia, featuring the Macmillan TAC 338 at extreme range. Emma immediately noticed slight modifications to the scope and the stock. Instead of arguing, she turned to Nathan's notebook. There, in his handwriting, were the adjustments needed to compensate. Blake went first, landing 9 out of 10 shots dead center. His score set a high bar and Emma would need near perfection to match. "Not everyone's made for this kind of pressure," Blake said loudly, loud enough for the audience to hear. Emma lay down behind the rifle, and as she took aim, a familiar focus settled over her, the same feeling she'd always had when training with Nathan. Emma began making precise adjustments, drawing from the insights Nathan had shared from his real-world missions. Using his formulas, she countered the subtle sabotage with methods rooted in combat discipline. Her first shot struck dead center. By the 6th, every bullet had found its mark of flawless bullseyes. The audience leaned in, captivated by the unfolding mastery. As Emma readied her final shot, a sudden glint of light flashed in her line of vision, a distraction seemingly coming from Blake's circle. She paused briefly, steadied herself, and with laser focus, delivered the final round with immaculate precision. A perfect 10th bullseye. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause, which quickly grew into a roaring standing ovation. Final results: Emma Miller, first place. Blake Radcliffe, runner-up, Rebecca announced, voice steady but unmistakably proud. Blake's practiced facade cracked. He extended a stiff, insincere handshake, his jaw clenched. "This isn't over," he muttered. Emma replied calmly, "For today, It is. And I believe you owe the Veteran Support Foundation $50,000. Blake's control shattered. You think this means anything? He barked. A widow with beginner's luck doesn't replace years of elite experience. This was all for show. The room fell into a stunned silence. The equipment was tampered with. Yes, it was, Rebecca interrupted, lifting her tablet. But not in Miss Miller's favor. She tapped the screen, revealing surveillance footage. It clearly showed Blake's technical advisor interfering with the firearms used in the event. Our club's security logs all access to the equipment room, she added coolly. Gasps rippled through the audience. Emma's flawless performance now stood not just as a triumph but as one achieved despite active sabotage. The respect in the room deepened. Blake stood motionless, grasping the weight of what had just unraveled. Not only had he lost, but his entire public persona built on dominance and prestige was now at risk of total collapse. By Sunday morning, clips of Emma's pristine final round and Blake's public breakdown had spread across every major platform. A once niche shooting event had exploded into a national conversation about privilege, resilience, and justice. Emma woke to a flood of calls and messages from reporters, sponsors, and curious strangers. She returned none of them. Instead, she called Michael Reeves. It's grown beyond what I imagined. What now? Michael's reply was measured. That depends. Do you want PCO or accountability? Emma thought for a moment. Blake hasn't paid the donation. And the equipment tampering? That's fraud. He should face the consequences. In the Radcliffe penthouse, Blake's crisis team scrambled to manage the situation. We'll draft a statement, his publicist proposed. Blame stress, admit a lapse in judgment, announce a donation to veteran programs, and check into a wellness retreat. I'm not apologizing, Blake snapped. She had military-level training if that's the real unfair edge. Before the team could respond, Boston police arrived at the suite. Mr. Radcliffe, we need you to answer some questions regarding alleged fraud and tampering, one officer said. There may be violations of Massachusetts gaming laws, due to the size of the wager involved. Meanwhile, Emma met with retired Marine Colonel James Harrison, director of the Veteran Support Foundation. Several of our board members also belong to the Elite Shooters Club, he explained. They've already initiated a process to strip Mr. Radcliffe of his titles. He then offered Emma something she hadn't expected. Our foundation has been designing a shooting-based reintegration program for veterans. We've seen strong therapeutic effects. We'd be honored to have you involved in developing and leading the initiative. 3 days later, Emma reviewed the legal settlement from Blake's lawyers. A $100,000 donation, a double the original pledge, a formal apology, and a private meeting request before anything was made public. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room. Blake arrived with his attorney, his trademark arrogance faded. The flashy clothing was gone, replaced by a modest, dark business suit. Mrs. Miller, he began, subdued. I want to sincerely apologize. I've spent my life building a reputation around being the best. When I felt that slipping, I lashed out a broken bar. His initial words, carefully practiced and cautious, gradually gave way to something far more honest. I handled it poorly, criminally, even, Blake admitted. I've never stood across from someone who shoots for something bigger than titles or recognition. It shook me. Emma took a moment before replying. Mr. Radcliffe, I didn't step onto that train to rattle anyone. I was keeping a promise to my husband. What you did didn't just disrespect me, it violated the spirit of a sport you claim to admire and disrespected a cause you pledged to support. Blake's expression faltered with real remorse. That's why I increased the donation, and why I've accepted a 3-year suspension from competition. With the settlement signed, they prepared to leave. Blake reached out his hand. For what it's worth, a broken bar, you're the best shooter I've ever gone up against. Your husband trained you well. Emma took his hand, briefly but firmly. He would have said I already had the skill. Sometimes the right teacher just helps you find what's already there. 2 weeks later, Emma stood on the freshly constructed range at the Veterans Support Foundation's new Rehabilitation Center, a project made possible by Blake's donation and support from top firearm manufacturers. Her first class gathered in front of her, 6 veterans, each bearing visible or hidden scars of service. Good morning, she began, her voice steady and clear, stronger than it had been in years. "My name is Emma Miller. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a champion. I'm just someone who learned that sometimes, the steadiest hands belong to those who've been shaken the hardest." She paused, looking each of them in the eye. "Today we begin with the basics of how to stand, how to breathe, how to focus." 6 months later, Emma took the stage at the Foundation's annual fundraiser. Her presence alone was a symbol of resilience. The room quieted as she began to speak. "A year ago," she said, "I stepped into a shooting range for the first time in 3 years, to honor a promise made to my late husband. I expected to fire a few rounds, remember what he taught me, broken bar, and return to my quiet life." A smile flickered across her face. "Instead, I found myself caught in a confrontation that became something much bigger. It became the start of this program, this community." That night, the Foundation introduced the Nathan Ghost Miller Excellence in Marksmanship Scholarship, awarded to veterans training to become shooting instructors. The first recipient, a former Army Ranger who had overcome immense injuries, stood proudly to accept the honor. Emma turned her wedding ring slowly. "One last time, this one's for you, Nathan, for everything you taught me, especially how to stand tall when it matters most." In the end, Emma's real triumph wasn't besting a man who underestimated her. It was reclaiming her place in the world and building something lasting from loss. From the moment she was overlooked at the Anna Drama Nest to now, confidently leading programs that changed lives, the message was undeniable. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Behind calm eyes and composed silence might live a storm of discipline, purpose, and courage forged in the fires of adversity. And if you ever find yourself dismissed or unseen, remember Emma Miller's journey from invisible to indispensable. How a woman once ignored on a shooting line transformed one moment of disrespect, a broken bar into a movement of honor, one perfect shot at a time.